Congratulations and welcome to your degree program with the University of Newcastle and the Broken Bay Institute in the discipline area of philosophy, religion and theology. This session is known in the University of Newcastle as a program information and enrolment session, and its big idea is to give you an orientation to your program, to the requirements of that program and to some of the features of that program that you'll encounter as you travel through it. For many of the University of Newcastle students, these program information and enrolment sessions are available on campus. However, given the nature of the program that you're engaging with, many students study from distances which are far away from the campus, which means it's impossible or very difficult for them to come to campus for a session like this, which is why it's being made available to you in this mode. You might be engaging in this session as an individual sitting in your lounge room at home, or perhaps as part of a bigger group of students who are travelling through their program together. Regardless of how you're engaging with it, congratulations again on receiving entry to the postgraduate program that you have received entry to, and you're very, very welcome. The purpose of this session is fourfold. The first part is to introduce you to relevant university and BBI staff and terminology, which we'll begin with in a moment, and that'll take us about 6 minutes. After that point, we'll introduce you to the UON and BBI model of theological education and why it's unique within the Australian context, and that'll take us about 7 minutes. The third, we'll introduce you to some important study habits which will help with your progression throughout your degree, which will take us about 8 minutes. And finally, we'll introduce you to some important university systems, reintroduce the staff that we found in the first instance and give you some of their contact details. Because that involves looking at a couple of different things, that takes a little longer, and we'll also have a chance to look at both the university website and the library website. That will take us about 25 minutes. You're listening to this program information and enrolment session because you're enrolled in either the Graduate Certificate or the Masters in Theology program. My name is Dr. Dan Fleming and I'm the Dean of Studies and also Lecturer in Theology and Ethics at the Broken Bay Institute. I'm also a conjoint lecturer for the School of Humanities and Social Sciences at the University of Newcastle, and I'll explain a little bit more about what that means in terms of the link between the Broken Bay Institute and the University of Newcastle in just a moment. So to begin with, we'll consider some new terminology that you'll come across as you engage in your degree program throughout your study with the University of Newcastle and the Broken Bay Institute. I'm actually going to start with that list there, but what I'm going to do is start at the bottom, given that that's your entry point into the university as a whole. At the University of Newcastle, your degree is known as a program, so I refer to it throughout this presentation as your degree program. So whenever you come across anyone talking or perhaps asking you about what program you're enrolled with the university, if you contact the university, they're referring to your degree program, which in your case will either be the Graduate Certificate in Theology or the Masters of Theology. At the University of Newcastle, those degrees are managed through the discipline of philosophy, religion and theology. So those three discipline areas are combined together at the university and have administrative responsibility for the Graduate Certificate in Theology and the Masters of Theology programs. The school of which those disciplines are a part is the School of Humanities and Social Sciences. The faculty of which the School of Humanities and Social Sciences is a part is the Faculty of Education of Arts, and of course that all comes under the larger umbrella of the University of Newcastle. There are two faces who you can see at the bottom of the screen there. The one on the left is Professor Caroline McMillan, who's the Vice-Chancellor who's in charge of the University of Newcastle as a whole. Next to her on the right is Professor John Germov, who's the Pro-Vice-Chancellor, so reports directly to the Vice-Chancellor, and Professor Germov is in charge of the Faculty of Education and Arts at the University of Newcastle. You are quite likely engaging with your degree program the Graduate Certificate in Theology or the Masters of Theology through the entry point of the Broken Bay Institute. And that's a partner institution of the University of Newcastle. So I'll go from the top of this list now and move downwards. That partnership between the Broken Bay Institute and the University of Newcastle was established in 2010. It's also, as a result, a part of the School of Humanities and Social Sciences, but more specifically still reports into the discipline of philosophy, religion and theology. And again, the programs or degrees that the Broken Bay Institute is most frequently associated with in the context of the University of Newcastle and teaches the most into are the Graduate Certificate of Theology and the Masters of Theology. So hopefully you can see by that structure there that the Broken Bay Institute reports into the university via the discipline of philosophy, religion and theology. All of the Broken Bay Institute's teaching staff are either conjoint lecturers or affiliate staff of the University of Newcastle who come in via the discipline of philosophy, religion and theology. On the bottom left there you can see Dr. Jared Goldman, who's the Chief Executive Officer of the Broken Bay Institute, and on the right there you can see me as the Dean of Studies of the Broken Bay Institute. There are a number of important names within that discipline of philosophy, religion and theology to get to know. All of the names here have quality assurance roles, and what we do is work very closely together to ensure that your progression throughout your degree program is according to the rules of that program, and that you're able to complete in a timely and effective manner and progress through your program in a logical way as well. We're also on hand to offer advice about different things throughout that program. So Dr. Timothy Stanley, who you can see at the top there, is a lecturer at the University of Newcastle in the discipline area of philosophy, religion and theology, and also the program convener for theology programs at the University of Newcastle. Remembering that a program is your degree program, Dr. Stanley has administrative and quality assurance responsibilities for those programs as a whole. He and I, and myself as the Dean of Studies at the Broken Bay Institute, work closely together with those administrative responsibilities. Next on the list, you'll see Michelle Hamilton, who's the Program Officer for Theology at the University of Newcastle. Michelle will likely be involved in many of your questions about the structure of your degree program, what courses you need to be enrolled in, and also will be a part of the process of establishing that you're eligible to graduate when you finish your degree program with the University of Newcastle and the Broken Bay Institute. Working closely with her are two Broken Bay Institute staff, one of whom is Cheryl Martin and the other of whom is Lucy Bringen. When we get to the end of this presentation and we talk about contact details, I'll give you the contact details of these people so that you can feel free to contact them if you have any questions about your progression through the program. For now, it's important just to note that we all work together in a quality assurance capacity to ensure that you're moving through your programs in the most appropriate way. So you'll often see that if you ask one of us a question, the response will be CC'd between us, which ensures that we're all on the same page and communicating together in terms of our roles as listed there. I want to take a step forward now and talk a little bit about the unique model of theology that's come to be known as the Newcastle model of theology, which is unique and important in the Australian context. In order to understand what this model is and why it's important, it's helpful to give a little background about religion and religious discourse in Australia. Ours is a context wherein religion in general is seen as the embarrassing subject, as the theologian and historian John Thornhill put it in his book Making Australia. Something which is seldom spoken about in public, save perhaps for a joke or two at the expense of the religions, or some more superficial and sometimes quite nasty debates surrounding them. It's a strange characteristic really for a context which is also characterized by an increased mingling of cultures and worldviews, which has been spurred on largely by the rapid advancement of globalization over the past 3 decades. At this point in time, to put it frankly, we encounter more cultural and religious others than we might have been able to in the past, whether this be virtually through the internet or television, or what's becoming increasingly the norm in the context of our classrooms, workplaces and social circles as well. It's the phenomenon now that if you go and ask someone, who are you and what do you do, frequently they will identify themselves in terms of the religious worldview of which they are a part. So they might say, I am a Christian, I am a Greek Orthodox Christian, I'm a Catholic Christian, I'm a Pentecostal Christian, or, expanding our boundaries still further, I'm a Muslim, I'm a Jew, I'm a Buddhist. This is the case both in Australia and in the world at large. All of this is emphasised when we consider the largely failed predictions of secularist prophets in the 1960s that the age of secularisation meant that the coming of a time wherein religion would be banished from public life. In fact, however, religion and religious worldviews in the early 21st century are alive, well, and operative for better and for worse. And in a variety of ways as well, be it political debate, popular culture, or people's personal worldviews, as we've just noted. Further, the presence of religiously motivated and identified service, educational, and healthcare institutions continue to play an important role in our society. To add to this mix, our time has seen the rise of the militant atheist movement as well as various militant religious fundamentalisms in all of the major religious traditions. Such observations are true not only for Australia, but for the rest of the world as well. And what emerges in such a context is what Lievenboever refers to as a plural field of multiple positions, which are related to each other, which possibly influence each other, learn from each other, question each other, conflict, even repudiate, and fight. In such a context, the posing of questions by, about, and between the religions, the very subject matter of theology, is inevitable, and dialogue surrounding these questions arises frequently. Unfortunately, in the Australian context, however, many simply do not have the skills for engaging in that dialogue in a critical and robust manner. In part, the reasons for this are historical. In Australia, theology as an academic discipline has typically not been part of public or interdisciplinary discussion. Australia's first university, the University of Sydney, constitutionally excluded theological education from their curriculum in order to prevent sectarian interests from contaminating academic pursuits. It was a move copied by the second university, the University of Melbourne, in 1871, so setting a pattern that our earliest universities by and large copied, if not in legislation, at least in practice. The result of this was that theology as a discipline tended not to be practiced within the academy, but was rather done by colleges and seminaries which were primarily concerned with the formation of ordained and lay persons within a particular tradition. And so one finds in Australia theology colleges for Catholics, Orthodox, Pentecostals, Uniting Church, as well as one major Catholic university, and a number of public universities which accredit the degree programs of the kinds of colleges we've just noted. Certainly it should be said that part of the discipline of theology's responsibilities involves enabling such traditions to think critically about themselves and their role in the world. However, these more partisan concerns have not prepared Australia at large for the kind of critical and robust dialogue needed in our multi-religious society. Here it's helpful to note that, as the Cambridge theologian David Ford has argued, the discipline of theology has a threefold responsibility. One dimension of this is a responsibility towards churches and other religious institutions along the lines that we've seen develop in the Australian context. The other dimensions are that theology has a responsibility towards the other academic disciplines and towards society at large as well. In terms of the other academic disciplines, this means learning from their advances in knowledge and insight, and seeking out the implications for theological claims and questions, as well as bringing theology to the table as a credible voice in the midst of such disciplines. In terms of the responsibilities to society at large, this means providing the language and skill set to navigate the plural field of multiple positions that is a fact of our current context. In view of this, the University of Newcastle's introduction of theology programs in 2000 was a significant and welcome innovation in the Australian context. As a public, secular university, UON provides a suite of theology programs which are intentional in fulfilling theology's responsibilities to the other disciplines and to the public square. Furthermore, the Broken Bay Institute's 2009 partnership with the University of Newcastle revealed a confidence in theology done in this way. As such, you'll notice that the courses which are taught by BBI share the concerns for theology's status as a discipline among disciplines and its responsibilities to society as well. Some of you will be engaging in a program with BBI and UON because you work for or are part of a particular religious institution, such as a Catholic school or healthcare agency. And such courses will also fulfill theology's responsibility for thinking critically through the beliefs, practices, and texts of these institutions and the tradition of which they're a part, with some courses being more explicitly focused on this than others. However, what is crucial to remember is that this will always be done with theology's threefold responsibility in mind. We'll shift now to some of the virtuous habits which, if cultivated throughout your degree program, will help you to improve your efficiency, engagement, and effectiveness in your study of theology. Furthermore, such virtues can help to ensure that your learning throughout the degree program is sustainable and lasting learning, and doesn't simply become a matter of getting through assessment tasks and forgetting about them soon after. Many of you would have developed similar working habits in previous studies, and as far as these have been useful and beneficial, then we'd certainly encourage you to continue them. For some of you, however, this current study will present with new challenges, such as balancing study with full-time work, family commitments, and so on. As such, cultivating some new virtues of the mind could be appropriate at this point in time. The discussion of virtues of the mind is informed by a number of important thinkers. Firstly, we could consider Aristotle, who, as a Greek philosopher who lived over 2,000 years ago, observed that human beings are habitual creatures when it comes to behavior. That is, we tend to repeat behaviors, and over time, these become almost automatic to us. Think for a moment about your morning routine, which likely involves, among other things, waking up, getting dressed, eating something, and cleaning your teeth. For the most part, such routines happen automatically. We don't need to think deeply about each part of them. They just happen, because we practice them time and time again. Aristotle argued that, broadly speaking, there were two different kinds of habits, virtuous ones and vicious ones. Virtuous habits are those habits which move us towards the flourishing life, and vicious habits are those which take away from such flourishing. An example would be habits surrounding food and drink, with temperance as a virtue being the habit of eating and drinking enough to flourish without going overboard, and gluttony as a vice being the habit of consistently having too much. Much later on, in the Middle Ages, Thomas Aquinas would take Aristotle's understanding of habit and virtue and explore its implications in a theological context. Later still, some contemporary neuroscientists have been looking carefully at how such habits develop and are strengthened over time in the brain, demonstrating the plausibility of some of Aristotle's original claims from this perspective. When it comes to your studies, the kind of habits which help you to achieve academic or intellectual flourishing are what we would refer to as virtues of the mind, and we'll consider a couple of these now. The first would be the virtue of taking time, that is, setting aside enough time in a consistent way throughout your degree program to engage in your studies in an adequate way. This is particularly important given the subject nature of theology, for it's not the kind of discipline that one can wing it with. Studying theology requires time for reading, reflecting, and writing in order to ensure that you are grappling with the ideas and thinking skills you'll need for this level of study. The second of these virtues of the mind is openness and curiosity. There's no doubt that you'll come across new, surprising, and perhaps even uncomfortable information as you engage with your studies. This is because theology is far more than a form of intellectual archaeology. Being open to what is new, surprising, and uncomfortable is crucial in general learning, because it's only by cultivating this virtue that we can be sure that we are truly receptive to learning, rather than simply looking for confirmation of what we may have heard and held to be true previously. Empathy is the next crucial virtue, at the very least on an intellectual level. There's a lot of talk about empathy in popular and academic literature at the moment, and broadly speaking, it's understood as the capacity to see or feel as another does, to stand in another's shoes, as it were. Here, when we refer to intellectual empathy, what we mean is the capacity to think as another thinks, to take seriously their argument, and to give it the time and respect that it deserves. This is rather simple when it happens to be a point of view that we agree with, but all the more difficult when it is something that we don't. Given the diversity of our current context, there's no doubt that you'll come across arguments and points of views which differ from your own in your study of theology. At an academic level, it's crucial that these are taken seriously, even if your ultimate goal is to be critical of them and to argue against them. Here we could look to the scholastic method of the disputation, which was used in the original theology classrooms in the very first universities by scholars such as Thomas Aquinas. On this approach, one must first get to know another's point of view well enough to defend it before arguing against it. This becomes all the more important in our current context, which, as we have seen, is incredibly diverse. Learning to think carefully through others' perspectives is a critical skill for robust dialogue here. Next we turn to thoroughness, which is the capacity to follow things through at an appropriate level of depth, detail, and breadth. In postgraduate study, this is a virtue which, when cultivated, allows you to consider not only the surface level of the ideas you're engaging with, but the thinking, research, presuppositions, and beliefs which sit behind them as well. In your own writing, it also involves the capacity to think through the implications of what you're proposing, and to follow the various threads of arguments as they develop throughout. As you'll see when you get to your course materials, such thoroughness is assessed in the marking rubrics, and your capacity to reveal this virtue in your assessment tasks could be the difference between a pass and a credit and a distinction, or a distinction and a high distinction. Critical thinking is another important virtue of the mind at this level of study. At times being critical can be stereotyped as being overly or wholly negative about things, but this is not necessarily the case. Rather, critical thinking sits alongside thoroughness and invites us to shine a spotlight on the material we're looking at in order to see it clearly and to assess its value. In terms of our study, this means asking questions about the validity of the arguments being presented by the authors we're reading in light of criteria such as the quality and plausibility of their arguments, their reception among other scholars, their foundation in research, support from other areas of research and study, and so on. As a former lecturer of mine once put it, if something is truthful, it can stand up to scrutiny, and it's this kind of scrutiny that is part and parcel of critical thinking. This too is reflected in the marking rubrics that will be used when it comes time for assessment. Finally, as part and parcel of all of the virtues of the mind noted above, we must also learn to cultivate the virtue of researching well, which involves engaging with appropriate resources at an appropriate level of depth and detail for postgraduate study. To research well, we need to take time. We need to be open and curious, possess intellectual empathy, be thorough, and think critically. Research also requires us to build up a set of skills for researching. That is, resourcing appropriate materials via our courses and the University of Newcastle and Broken Bay Institute libraries, as well as other appropriate sources as well. As such, we'll move in a moment to consider some of those facilities which will allow us to develop that virtue further. So just to summarize, we've been looking at some of the virtues of the mind that will allow us to engage in our coursework over the degree program in a more effective way. The significance of this is, as we noted earlier, as we practice these things again and again, they become more and more automatic, and as a result they require less and less struggle and effort on our part to embody. So if we can begin at the beginning of our degree program by putting such habits in place, practicing them again and again, by the end of our program they'll be second nature to us, and it will ensure that A, we can get through our programs in a more effective way, that is, we can flourish intellectually, B, that our work will reflect this when we submit it at the end of the day, and C, that these kinds of things that we're embodying as we go through our degree program will provide lifelong learning skills that will be with us long after we graduate, and hopefully will allow the content, the ideas, and the discoveries that we come across throughout our study to stay with us for a much more long period of time as well. What we're going to do now is shift to some of the services that are available to you as a student of the University of Newcastle. What's really important to emphasize here is that you're not at all disadvantaged by not being able to visit one of the campuses of the University of Newcastle throughout your studies. In fact, all of the support services that are available to students who step on the campus each day throughout their degree program are also available to you through the excellent online systems that are available through the University of Newcastle. So what we're going to do is talk through some of those systems now, beginning with what I'd refer to as the gateway to your online campus, and that is the MyUON website. I'm actually going to just switch screens now and show you how to access that website from the University of Newcastle's homepage. So here we are at the University of Newcastle's homepage. You can see up here www.newcastle.edu.au. When you log into this page, you get this lovely home page at the start, which gives you some news and information about the university. And the section that you want to go through first of all, and probably bookmark so that it's easy for you to get to and quick for you to get to throughout your studies, is this one up here that my mouse is over at the moment, called Current Students. So if we click on that, it'll take us to a new page. And this is really, if you think about it, as the front gate to the campus, where the notice boards are, when you can see what's going on in the university. You can actually see here that there's a login to MyUON link there, and another way of accessing it is by clicking on Quick Links and going down to MyUON here. So whichever of those you take, if you click on it, it will take you to this page here. And then all you need to do is insert your student number there and your password there, click on login, and it will take you to the MyUON homepage. So I'll just go back to my slideshow now. Your MyUON homepage will present you with a menu on the left which looks like this. And this is your quick launch navigation menu. Handily, it provides you with a link to all of the services that you will need to engage with throughout your degree program. Now what I'm going to do in this session is just speak through each of these. So if I were to click on My Hub, for example, I'll speak through the administration requirements that you'll need to know about in terms of that system there. We'll then talk about the uOnline system, we'll talk about your university email system, we'll talk about the library as well, and a couple of these systems down here too. So all of these are crucial systems that you'll need to engage with. So if we continue with our metaphor, we've walked through the front gate of the campus now, and now we're standing in front of perhaps one of the student hubs, which will direct us to the right information that we need as we go through our course of study. So we'll begin with clicking on this My Hub button here. Given that you're already enrolled in the program, you would have already accessed My Hub, and you're probably already enrolled in some courses, so you would have enrolled through the My Hub program. What My Hub allows you to do is enroll in and drop courses throughout your progression through your degree program. As we said at the beginning, there are two groups of students listening to this program information and enrollment session. The first group is enrolled in the Graduate Certificate in Theology. So just to give you some information about how that program runs, it's 40 units in total, and each of the courses you'll engage with constitutes 10 of those units. So in other words, it's like saying that it's 4 courses in total. The program is run at either one semester full-time, so if you're a student studying full-time, that's how long you'd need to enroll for, and up to 3 years part-time as well. So you can spread your study across the 3 years in order to balance it with other commitments that you might have. The grand majority of students studying a graduate certificate in theology study in part-time mode. The majority of those complete it within 2 years, but you've got the 3-year time frame if need be. There are 20 units of core courses in the Graduate Certificate of Theology. Regardless of which specialization you've chosen to be enrolled in for the graduate certificate, you need to study these courses. The first one is Theo 6040, Faith, Revelation and Theology, and Theo 6030, Biblical Studies Foundations. All students need to enroll in, study and successfully complete both of those courses in order to complete the graduate certificate in theology. There are also 20 units in directed courses, and you're directed to these depending on which specialization you're enrolled in. Rather than going through all of the specializations themselves, what you can do is click on or type in that link there and go to what's known as the program handbook, which sets out all of the rules for enrolling in this program. Within that, you'll be able to see all of the different specializations, and you'll also be able to see which directed courses you'll need to choose in order to complete your program. You'll also be able to see when those courses are being offered in a given academic year. If you're studying your program as part of a cohort group, so perhaps you're studying as part of the Tasmania Catholic Education cohort, for example, your cohort leaders and the people who work in management in the Catholic Education Office would have talked with the Broken Bay Institute and the University of Newcastle about what pattern of enrolment their students can follow in order to complete their graduate certificate in theology program successfully. So some of those things would have already been worked out, and your progression will go along with your cohort's progression as all the students around you enroll in different programs throughout. If you've got questions about that, I'll give you Lucy's contact at the end of the session so that you can talk to her. The Master of Theology program is 80 units total, which, following on the pattern above, equates to 8 courses normally. At full-time load, it would be 2 semesters long, and you can take up to 4 years part-time to engage with that. Again, the majority of our students complete the Master of Theology in a part-time mode. There are 20 units of core courses still for the Master of Theology, which are the same ones as the Graduate Certificate in Theology: Theo 6040, Faith, Revelation and Theology, and Theo 6030, Biblical Studies Foundations. There are 60 units of compulsory and directed courses after this. Compulsory courses being courses that you absolutely have to take to complete the specialization, and directed courses the same deal as above with the Graduate Certificate in Theology. Again, you can see the program handbook for your options available there. And with both of those programs, if you have questions about your progression, you can contact Michelle, Cheryl or Lucy, whose contact details we'll give at the end of this session now. So that's basically my hub, which is involved in the enrollment into these different courses which constitute the different parts of your program as you progress through it towards completion. The next thing we'll look at is your student email account. So in order to access that from your Quick Launch navigation pad, you click on the New Mail button there, and that will take you to the login for your student email. This is your primary method of keeping in touch with the university, with the university's professional staff such as Michelle Hamilton, with the Broken Bay Institute's professional staff such as Cheryl Martin and Lucy Bringen, with academic staff such as the lecturers who you'll be engaging with, who will be marking your work, and so on. It's hugely important, therefore, that you check this email regularly, at the very least once a week, but probably more would be better for you. The reason that it's important that you check this email address is, really there are a couple of reasons. The first is that the university staff, including the lecturers, have no choice but to contact you on the university email address. They're unable to contact you on, say for example, bubblegum51@hotmail.com, because there's no way for them to guarantee that it's actually you who they're contacting. So it becomes a privacy issue, and it also becomes a legal issue as well. So the university knows your identity, and they've been able to work through the relevant administration procedures to establish that and give you your university email account, and that's the account that they'll contact you on throughout the semester. Further reasons are that the Blackboard learning system, through which all of our courses are delivered, when a lecturer puts up an announcement, for example, and asks that that be communicated by email to students, it will come only to your University of Newcastle email. Now, I know in this day and age many of us have many email addresses that we need to check, but it's absolutely crucial that you continually check this one. Some other examples of why you might be contacted on it is if Michelle or Cheryl or Lucy is checking your enrolment and have noticed that you haven't completed a core course, they'll contact you in the first instance on that email. You'll also receive notifications about marks being available, for example, and university-wide announcements as well. So it's hugely important that you check that email regularly. Your university email address is listed there, so it will be a small c followed by your student number at uon.edu.au. So just to re-emphasize that point again and again, it's hugely important. Get into the habit, or even the virtue, since it will be so good for your study, of regularly checking your university email account. Well, the next thing that we'll look at here is uOnline, which is the University of Newcastle's online learning management system. In other words, if we've walked into the campus, we've seen the notice board where we get contacted on, and our personal pigeonholes, which would be our email address, the enrolment function, which is where we choose and enroll in the courses that are proper to our program. When we step into uOnline, we're stepping into our online classroom. So again, I encourage you, as soon as you click that uOnline button, think of that analogy of stepping into the classroom that you'll be engaging with when you go onto campus, so that you still feel that you're part of the university context, even though you're not physically there. Within uOnline, there are a number of different functionalities which you'll explore as you engage with it yourselves. The most important one that we need to be aware of is the Blackboard facility. So that's where your online classroom will be housed. Many of us can remember the days wherein classrooms actually had real blackboards and chalk and chalk dust and everything wonderful that went along with that in classrooms. This is a slightly different kind of blackboard, but it still has teaching and pedagogy at its heart. When you log into Blackboard and then click on this button here, you'll see a menu on the bottom right hand side of the screen that says My Course Sites. Whatever that you've enrolled in MyHub and has been opened by the lecturer, so when the semester starts, you will see listed here under My Course Sites. So for example, if you'd enrolled in Theo 6044 Studies of Religion, you would see Theo 6044 Studies of Religion there. Clicking on that course will take you into the course. You'll see an announcement from your lecturer welcoming you and instructing you on how to engage in the course throughout the semester. So those are your course sites. You'll also see listed below My Course Sites the program site for the graduate certificate and the Masters in Theology, and it would be a good idea to check that site from time to time as well, as we'll be putting up announcements and different communications which are relevant for you in the program as a whole, so aren't just proper to a particular course you're studying, but are proper to your whole program. As with any online system, there are a lot of tips and tricks which can help you to engage more fruitfully in the system, to overcome some of the challenges that people often encounter and things like that. To find that information, this link here will be tremendously helpful. So the Centre for Teaching and Learning Online, it contains many tutorials for engaging with things like discussion forums, for submitting your assessments online, and for getting the most out of online learning generally. If ever you have technical problems, dialing that number there will take you to the IT Services Help Desk, and this would go for your email and other online services as well if you're having problems with them. That phone number is 02 4921 7000. 02 4921 7000. So just re-emphasizing the point there, uOnline is your stepping into the classroom, and your course sites are stepping into your particular courses that you'll be engaging with. Just the last thing to note there is this academic integrity module. I'd encourage you to click on that and have a look at it and complete it as soon as possible when you engage with your program. It's a module which teaches you the basic skills of referencing and the importance of academic integrity as you go through your degree program. We spoke before about the virtue of researching and researching well, and there are a variety of different resources that you're going to need to research and engage in throughout your degree program in order to ensure that you do so successfully. This is particularly important at postgraduate level because what you're asked to do in postgraduate level and undergraduate level as well, in fact, is not just regurgitate information, not just look at the course materials, but engage in further research as well. There are a number of different resources you can use, and we'll begin by looking at the University of Newcastle's library. What I'm going to do is actually flick to the library page and show you a number of different resources that are available to you as students of the University of Newcastle. So I'm just going to click here. This is just the University of Newcastle Library's home page. The first thing I want to show you is this section here, which is known as short loans. And this will be relevant for any compulsory course readings that a lecturer has put up which aren't available as ebook readings. In other words, if I have been researching for a course, I've found a really good chapter of a book which isn't available as an ebook, and I make an electronic copy of that, that will be stored in the short loan system here, and you can log into that system and download the relevant document there and print it out or read it on the screen or whichever you prefer. So to access short loans for your course, you just click on that button there, and then you'll see here the type of search that you need to engage with in order to find the course. So you'll know the course code that you've enrolled in, and we'll use, just for example here, Theo 6044, which is Studies of Religion, which I just mentioned. We'll submit search, and you can see here all of the readings that have been uploaded for that course by Dr. Peter Mudge, who's the course coordinator. At first they can look a little strange. If you know the author of the loan that you're trying to grasp there, just click on the author's name and it will be put in alphabetical order according to that, which should help you to find them more quickly. So have a look at your course outline, at what reading the lecturer has prescribed, and then go into short loans and have a look at them there. We'll just go back to the library homepage now. There are a variety of other kinds of resources available to you, so we're certainly not limited to short loans here, given that you're studying online. In fact, the University of Newcastle has an incredibly good online resources section, which includes ebooks and many online e-journals as well. I'm just going to use the example of Thomas Aquinas here, since we've mentioned him quite a few times throughout this presentation. So say, for example, you were doing an assessment on Thomas Aquinas and virtue, and you know there are many different tricks for engaging with library research as well, so we won't go into detail on those now. But just as a broad thing, if I wanted to look up something on Thomas Aquinas and virtue, I'd hit search there. And there are many different resources available to you in terms of Thomas Aquinas and virtue ethics. There are many different kinds of resources too, so you can see on the left hand side here that there are a number of just e-resources. If you wanted to just engage with e-resources, so resources that you could engage with from the comfort of your own home, for example, click on that there. If you're interested in engaging in hard copy, perhaps you can make a visit to the library or somewhere nearby it. You can click on book there and it will tell you which library those are a part of. This other sources button here will take you to journal articles, and it will search the university's whole catalogue for different articles which hit those search results. We won't look at that right now, but suffice it to say that there are plenty of excellent journals for you to engage with. Instead of looking into all of those specifics, which will kind of keep us here until probably the next semester begins, what I'd like to show you is the subject research guide for religion and theology, because this has a lot of the handy hints within it, and it also tells you a lot of the journals which might be useful for you in engaging with your study in theology. Also, just to note the help button here, which you can click on and has a variety of different help options from the library. So have a look at this subject research guides button here. If you just click on that, you can see that all the subject research areas are listed here for the whole university. If we go down to R, we'll find religion and theology. And we click on that. There are a number of excellent resources that are available in here. So you can have a look here, click on journal databases, and you'll get a list of different journal databases that will be useful. Ebooks and other e-resources not only lists ebooks that are useful for theology and religion, but also how to access those ebooks. There are some excellent links to websites here, and significantly many of you will be asking questions about how to reference. Clicking on that referencing link there will take you to a number of different guides, websites and helps for engaging in referencing properly. There are some contact details here for the faculty librarian for education and arts, who is Ruth Talbot Stokes, so you can contact Ruth and she'll be very helpful to you. And it's also just important to note that every now and then new books of interest are put up here, often which are available as electronic books which you can engage with online. So that's the University of Newcastle library resource. Plenty of resources for you to engage with there, so you won't be disadvantaged at all in studying away from the university in terms of what you can access. The other library resource that's available to you is the Broken Bay Institute's library. Now that's not an electronic library, it's only a hard copy library. However, you can look into the library catalogue, which is available via that address there, or contact the library in that way. And if you see a book that you think will be very helpful for your studies, you can contact the library even if you live a long way away and request that book. And what the library will do is send it out to you by post. So make sure you're planning ahead if you're going to do this. They'll send it out to you by post on the condition that you send it back once you've finished with it and once the loan has expired. So those are the excellent library resources that are available to you to help you to fulfill that virtue of researching and researching well that we discussed before. As you progress through your degree program, it's likely that you're going to need to engage with various support and administration services. One of the best places to look if you've got a question about anything, so you don't know who to ask about how to get a library account, for example, or how to get a library PIN, or you've forgotten your password and you're not sure who to contact about it, or you need to lodge a request for adverse circumstances for a course and you're not sure who to contact about it. By clicking on that Ask UON button, you'll be given both FAQs and forms to submit, which will allow you to submit a question, and they'll get back to you very quickly with a response to that question. Other things that you might need throughout your studies are things like different forms and assessment cover sheets. So, as you know, when you submit an assessment, you need to include a cover sheet. There are various forms that you need to fill out throughout your studies, such as when you're applying to graduate. You can find all of these things if you have a look at your quick launch navigation pad there by clicking on student forms down the bottom. All of those forms are available for you for download on that website there. IT support, as we mentioned before, there's a phone number and a web address, an email address that you can send to. You can also submit via this IT service portal by clicking on that button there. As students of the University of Newcastle, you have access to excellent support when it comes to academic skills and counselling as well, and you can access any of that kind of support by clicking on this My Support button there to see a full list of the services that are available to you and that you're very welcome to use as students of the University of Newcastle. And the final one I'll just mention there is this adverse circumstances link here. It sometimes happens as you're progressing through a course that something will happen, such as you might get sick, or a family member might pass away, or you have extraordinary work commitments which prevent you from submitting an assessment online. If that assessment is worth 20% or greater, You just need to log into this system here, the adverse circumstances, and request an extension via that. What it'll ask you to do is submit some supporting documentation, which you can do electronically, and then that will be passed on to your course coordinator for approval or not, depending on the case that's been put forward for requesting the extension. Again, you'll receive confirmation of both you putting that in there and whether or not the extension has been granted through your University of Newcastle email. So it's hugely important that you continually check that throughout your studies. Finally, it's been promised throughout, but here are some important contacts who you can contact if you have questions about these different areas throughout your degree program. So for matters relating to your enrolment and program progression, you can contact Michelle Hamilton, who, as I mentioned from the outset, is the program officer at the University of Newcastle for the degree programs that you're enrolled in. Her email address is there, michelle.hamilton@newcastle.edu.au, and her phone number is there as well. Or you can contact Cheryl Martin, who's in Student Services at the Broken Bay Institute. As I mentioned, these are quality assurance roles, and between the institutes, these people work closely together and will often CC each other in on any advice given to students to ensure that everybody is on the same page. If you're studying with a cohort, so for example I mentioned before the Tasmanian Catholic Schools Office cohort, or perhaps the Broken Bay Catholic Schools Office cohort, Lucy Brigham will be the first person to contact if you've got questions about your progression along with that cohort. The reason for this is simply that the cohorts go through as a large group of students rather than as individuals, and so Lucy has the role of coordinating that for the most part, so she's well and truly on top of what cohorts are studying when, what's coming up and so on, and you've probably, if you're listening to this, you've probably already been in touch with Lucy. Any of those student services staff, the professional staff there, Michelle, Cheryl or Lucy, I know will be happy to hear from you with any question, and if either of them don't know the answer, they'll put you in touch with someone who does. So do feel free to contact them at any time throughout the progression of your degree program. Well, congratulations and welcome again to your postgraduate degree program with the University of Newcastle and the Broken Bay Institute. I trust that this program information and enrolment session has been helpful for you, and I look forward to hopefully seeing you in a course across the next year or next couple of years as you progress towards the completion of your degree. All the best, good luck, and enjoy the learning.